So this week we're going to be talking about joining a new organization and how to create impact within an organization as a new leader. And to do that, I've got Michael Banner, who's recently joined a new organization himself, being co-op, and kind of speaking straight from experience, I think, of things you've done now, and I'm assuming
Yeah,
obviously through joining previous organizations as well. So,
yeah,
thanks, Michael. How are you doing?
yeah. Not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Not too bad.
Good.
So how long have you been at the new company now?
So I've been with Co-op, I think, just touching on 3 months. Yeah, I think it's kind of like this week is my third month. So yeah, seems
Nice,
it's definitely flowing. Yeah, it seems less, but yeah,
nice. I feel like the older you get, like the
yeah,
quicker time passes. Like
yeah. Especially if you have kids as well.
yeah, for sure. How's the little one doing, by the way?
Yeah, she's good. Yeah, so I've actually got four kids. So we had
You got
one. She's
four?
just yeah, yeah. So she's
Fair play.
the
I've got
the
one,
newest
and
one.
I was about to complain.
Yeah, the newest one. She's just turned 6 months. So yeah,
Oh,
it's all good.
cute. I'm currently in 4 month sleep regression, so you're going to tell
Yeah,
me that it
it's
does get better at six
I'm
months.
not saying anything. No
I don't,
promises.
everyone's been telling me 6 months, and then someone yesterday was like, "Yeah, by about like 9, 10 months, it starts to level out." I was like, "No, I can't go to like 9 or 10." But yeah, four. I won't complain about anything if you've got four. So no, I've just got
Very
the one. But
experienced.
yeah, for sure. So yeah, like I guess is this like obviously what you're going to talk through? Is this like an approach that you have to like every new organization that you have, or is this something that you've kind of built
Um,
around your latest role?
I think it's kind of been a kind of like an ongoing thing. So as I've kind of joined different companies, it's kind of you build up, I guess, like a list of kind of different approaches. I guess some of the stuff is probably relatively situational. I think for the most part, it is kind of like a template to a degree, but I think it's one of those things where you iterate as you kind of learn new things, and obviously certain things just won't apply based on size of company and challenges that you're facing. But yeah, I think for the most part, like people will be able to kind of at least take some small points and tips.
For
That's
sure.
the main aim anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And so let's jump into it. So the first one that you kind of
Yeah,
put down is like building rapport. So
yeah,
like
yeah.
what what are we talking about there? Is that with your team? Is that with the organization? Is it kind of a bit of everything?
I think in general, it kind of encompasses like everybody that you deal with, like within the company. But I think first and foremost, if you're joining a team as a manager, like within my experience, obviously you're working with a team of individuals. So obviously in my case, as an engineering manager, I'm working with a bunch of engineers. So I guess like my recent kind of joining of Co-op, like I'm working with a team of platform engineers. So there's obviously different nuances in the kind of scope of the work that the team's going to be working on, the kind of the skill sets, where people are within their career, and everything else. And for me, joining a business as a manager, as a leader, it's really important to kind of make sure you understand like where those people are. And some of this stuff kind of comes out like over time because you need to kind of, as I kind of mentioned, you need to build that rapport with the individuals so that they feel comfortable having things like career conversations, being a bit more open around maybe personal challenges that they've got. So like if you need to offer any kind of like pastoral care, they're kind of happy with approaching you with kind of certain situations that might be going on and that kind of thing. So for me, it's kind of like really, really crucial to kind of build that rapport. So obviously you can do things like kind of meeting with your team, just in general. Obviously, kind of like setting the scene. I think like looking at like day one, you don't want to kind of be delaying the kind of introduction to meet everybody because I think depending on the size of the business. So for example, like Co-op is a huge business and you can probably easily get ingrained in just general onboarding activities like training and health and safety videos, all that kind of fun stuff. And that can easily take you like a week, maybe even 2 weeks, depending on the amount of stuff you need to get through. And if, as a new starter within like a kind of management position, you're kind of leaving it too long, then obviously it can feel a bit stale when you're kind of going into the team and starting to go like, "Hi, I'm Mike. I'm your new manager," and it's kind of you've been there for a week. So I think the kind of the timing of things is really important as well. So the quicker you can kind of get in and kind of introduce yourself and start to have those like general conversations with people, like the better.
Yeah.
So it's
You
exactly what I
got you
did.
guys
Yeah.
you guys at Co-op, are you remote or hybrid or
So it's kind of like a bit of both. So we're kind of pushing into more of a like a remote model in terms of like hiring people from like across the UK, and we do have some colleagues who kind of work through like consultancies and stuff as well, like third parties who are fully remote. for the most part, we are remote, and the team just decide to kind of go into Manchester every now and then. So it's kind of almost like an as and when, depending on the team as well. There's no kind of like sets. You must be in the office on X number of days. So yeah,
Yeah.
very flexible.
Because I guess within particularly like remote organizations, there might be a little bit
Yeah.
of a, oh, like I'll wait, do this in person, and then you might not
Mm,
actually cross over with someone for like a
yeah.
couple of weeks
Yeah.
or something like that, right? So were you
Yeah.
literally day one, bit of time and like everyone's diary of kind of like agenda
Pretty
of what
much.
you
Yeah.
wanted to go through, a little bit of an introduction and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I think that was very much the case. So I think even though I knew that the team would go into Manchester like very like occasionally, I didn't want to kind of leave it until that point to kind of go, well, let's have our first one-to-one. So for me, it was kind of, yeah, it would be nice further down the line to actually meet people in person, which is like I think is due to happen in like a week or two. So if it held off, it would have been 3 months before I'd actually had a one-to-one, which is obviously not a great thing.
Like, by the way, I'm Mike. I've been here for
Yeah,
like 89
nice to meet
days.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the kind of the first thing for me there was just literally just get some calls in with people and kind of was in a situation where the team was already in place. It wasn't like a brand new team, so they had like an incumbent engineering manager who was due to kind of move into a different role. So there was kind of like a nice overlap there where I could kind of join in, shadow them, get to know the people a bit more, and then gradually kind of take the reins and kind of run with it. So I think in terms of like my recent experience, it was kind of panned out quite nicely. And then obviously, if I do get to meet people in person, that's kind of yeah, that's good as well.
For sure. In terms of like transitions, that must be like perfect scenario, right? Coming in, like
Yeah,
no one's
yeah,
left on like bad terms. They're kind of still there to do
yeah,
handover. It's
yeah,
not all of a sudden they've got a manager when they haven't had a manager before. So,
yeah.
I guess like what are you kind of going through in those first calls? Is it literally just almost like therapy session? Like just tell me everything about like where you feel like we're up to, or is it literally just like right, let's just get to know each other like a little bit,
Um,
and we'll do something a bit more in depth about career and all that kind of stuff further down the line.
yeah, I think it's a good question. I think for me, it's very situational. That's kind of like how I've seen it in the past. It just depends on like where the team and the individuals are, as you say, because I've joined organisations in the past where they've been without a manager for 12 months. So to have somebody else come in, I guess it's just feels a bit alien to them to have somebody kind of join, but then equally they also want that support. So some people kind of jump on it as an opportunity to go, let me just spill out kind of my life story and I need this help, like screaming. Whereas some people are just a bit reserved and thinking, okay, we've got this new manager. How good is he? What can he do? And they kind of, I guess, almost like playing the game of just trying to understand who I am, what kind of makes me tick, and understand. I guess that building that rapport, as I've said, over like a longer period of time. And I think the challenge with that as well is obviously some of the previous roles I've been moving into have been like fully remote at that point. So there's definitely a challenge there because if you're sat next to somebody in an office, it's easier to kind of have like that general like coffee machine or water cooler conversations rather than kind of just like randomly calling people on Slack and kind of saying, "Oh, let's have a little chat." That kind of remote distance thing just kind of makes things a little bit harder, but I think it's not impossible. Um, I think in terms of like the situation now, so yeah, kind of that kind of handover period is like it's been really useful. So the again, it was like situational again because some people are just more open, just naturally they just kind of want to jump straight in and go, do you know what, I'm struggling with these things. It's great that Joe Bloggs is moving on to another team. You're my manager now, and I need help with these things. Whereas some people are still kind of going through that process of trying to gauge how I can support them. And I think the other challenge as well is because the role of a manager can be different between every company. So like what I've found is recently joining Co-op, engineer and manager as a role is slightly different to what I've seen in other companies, which again has been different to other companies still. So it's kind of not also navigating those nuances between like what is the expectation of my role, because like in some places EMs are like very technical and more technically focused with a bit of people management. Some places like Co-op are more focused around like the individuals and career progression and growth. And it's kind of like knowing how to strike that balance as well. So there's kind of other elements to the role which kind of feed into that challenge of like that onboarding. So
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. And I guess it's like a little bit of a balance and different depending on like the size of organization and things like that. But almost like
yeah,
coming in and coaching like a new like football team, like you're not
yeah,
gonna rip everything to shreds and like just kind of start again. Well, in the
yeah,
majority of cases, but like you're looking to kind of see how things have been done, like what the structure's like, how the team functions, how the company functions as a whole,
mm,
and then just be
yeah,
like, right, well, what can I change? What should I change? What has to stay? Like what should stay? Like all of that kind of stuff. So I
yeah,
guess I guess probably up to the point where you are now, you're kind of just figuring out like the company as a whole, and then seeing like if to a point like who's a good
Yeah.
fit for that team, who's happy in that team, who's happy in their current role, all of that kind of stuff. So is it? Would you say you're still going through that, like building? Obviously, it's going to be ongoing the whole time you're there. But would you
Yeah.
say you're still
Yeah.
going through that initial like building rapport stage?
I think so. I think I've made leaps and bounds. I think it's kind of like the clear thing. So 3 months in, I think I only did the full handover about a month into the role. So I've only been doing like the full kind of one-to-ones with people for about 2 months. But even in that scenario, I think like the kind of rapport is like really built up. Some more than others, which is perfectly fine because people kind of take a longer time to kind of warm up, and some people have like really lent into, okay, you've got this past experience, and like how can I jump in and kind of get some of that experience from your brain? And I think that's like really really good to see. And as you say, like some people it just take a little bit longer, and like again, that's perfectly fine. I'd rather like my direct reports kind of work at their own pace and kind of make sure that they can leverage what I can give to them at whatever pace they kind of like deem fit. So I think you kind of like touched on the other point there as well in terms of obviously there's the element of like building that rapport, but then as a kind of a manager or a leader in a business, it's also about navigating the business as a whole and kind of understanding like the context of the domain, any challenges that the business might be having as a whole, and how you can feed into that as a kind of within a kind of management context. Um, and again, that probably kind of takes me on to like one of the other points which you kind of wanted to touch on is around similar to when you join a company as like a junior engineer. Like you want to be going in there and asking all the questions because you want to try and immerse yourself and understand all the different parts of like the domain, the context, the challenges that they're facing, and trying to really understand like what are the problems that people are trying to solve, both in terms of like an engineering perspective and kind of building stuff with the product, but then also kind of in terms of like process and everything else that goes with it. So I think having that real inquisitive nature should kind of never leave you during your career, especially in terms of like management as well. Because I think a lot of people kind of preach on when you're a junior, you've got the opportunity to kind of ask all the questions and not kind of feel stupid asking them. But I think you're in a very similar situation as well when you're a manager, especially when you kind of join as a new starter. You've got that ability to kind of go, "Hey, I'm new here. Like, what can I find out about X, Y, Z?" and start kind of asking those kind of like newbie questions where you've kind of got almost like got that buffer of, "Oh, you should already know this," if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I'm
But
guessing the window is probably slightly smaller as an engineering manager than as a
yeah,
junior.
yeah,
But like
yeah,
you said, you're coming in, you essentially know nothing. You've had three, four
yeah,
conversations with the company, probably not met any of your team, or if anything,
yeah,
very few of them, and you don't know anything about their structure. And like a role, and even an organization can look exactly the same on the outside, but then
yeah,
when you actually get in there, it can be completely different, right? So
yeah,
there
absolutely.
must be, whether it's a couple of weeks, couple of months of literally just trying to get your head around all of their processes. Even
Hmm.
even stuff like between people on LinkedIn, I see people arguing about like whether one-to-one should be half an hour once a week or 1 hour like
Yeah,
every two
yeah,
weeks and like how productive they are and all that kind of stuff. And it must be like,
yeah,
right, like, well, what are they doing at the moment? Are they working? Like, can I change that, or is it a company structure
yeah,
thing? Like, and actually working
yeah,
out like, right, how do you guys do this? What are you getting out of them? What would you improve? Like all of that kind of stuff. But is it if you just did a few one-to-ones and then like 4 weeks in, you're just like, oh, like, well, these aren't really working. Is this like a company thing, or like,
mm,
like you're almost kind of like too late by that point, aren't you? So you kind of
yeah,
got to
absolutely.
get in. And did you kind of have like things going in that you were like, right, I need to find out like all of these things, or were you very much like on the fly,
Um,
just being like, oh, so how does that work? How does that work?
I think there's certain things where I kind of go in with a question of like understanding or like wanting to understand how something works. So I think for the main part, it's usually around kind of like delivery and how things hit the team. So in terms of like how does the work flow through the team? Like how does it go from ideation through to actual build and kind of go out the door and understanding, I guess, more the technical aspects of kind of like pipelines and all the kind of the I guess the fun stuff, the kind of the techie stuff. So they're kind of things I go in with because they can like really differ between companies, and that quickly identifies kind of where they are in terms of, I guess, like technical maturity with like different approaches. Um, the other thing I kind of go in and kind of do things on the fly is more around so like what you touched on there in terms of like one-to-one structures and kind of the cadence of them and that kind of thing. I generally go into teams and speak with individuals and almost let them decide and help shape some of the formats of these things because I think when it gets down to the one-to-one level as a line manager, it's really important to understand like what is going to work best for the individuals. So some people might want that support with a one-to-one every week. Some people are happy with 2 weeks, and generally I don't really recommend anything beyond 2 weeks because like a catch up every month just kind of feels too distant
Yeah.
in my eyes. And I guess the other thing as well is kind of having that flex of there's no kind of set format for like a one-to-one as an example. So I don't want it just to fall into the trap of every week it's just a status update because I get that stuff day to day through stand-ups and other kind of key ceremonies within the team. So the one-to-ones for me are very much around like how can I support you as your manager. So one week if you just want to come in and have a complete moan about something and we can just I'll sit there and listen, like I'm completely happy with that. The next week, if you kind of want me to be more of a mentor, I'm happy to kind of jump in and be the mentor. Or if you want some coaching, I can be a coach. Or if you just want signposting, I can signpost. So I guess it's very situational. So I tend not to kind of go digging for, is there a company structure for one-to-ones? I like to kind of offer that back to the individuals themselves to kind of understand what is going to work best for them.
Do you get people to prep before their like one-to-ones of like have a think about what you would like to discuss this week, or do you literally just
So
join them and be like, right, what do you need from me? How can I help?
So generally, like I do propose a structure, but like a very loose one. So the kind of thing which I've done in the past that seems to work quite well is kind of looking at like highlights, lowlights, and then kind of just any queries. I think it's kind of like a light enough structure where people can even kind of turn up without having put much thought into it and kind of at least kind of go through the head and go, okay, well, what have I done over the last week or two and what have been the highlights, what are the things I've struggled with and I might need some support with. And then obviously queries is just like, how do I get training budget or like those kind of things, which is just more general. Um, Given that I've kind of put that format in place, a lot of people do tend to prepare more now, which is kind of cool because it means they've got better quality things to talk about. But at the same time, if they've been super busy or they've been off, they can come in and at least still have a bit of a think on the fly and kind of chat through some of those ideas. But again, it's very situational. So like even though that format is a suggested approach from me, I don't enforce it. Like it's good if people use it, that's fine. Just kind of gives us a nice thing to flow through. But at the same time, as I say, if people want to come in and have a bit of a rant or a focus on some hyper specific thing, then that's fine.
Yeah, for sure. And then one of the other main points that you kind of put down here was demonstrating your worth. I guess
Yeah,
as
yeah,
a leader, like there's obviously going to be some people, like you said, that are super happy that you've joined, excited about you. There'd be some people that are apprehensive, looking at your LinkedIn
mm,
and being like, "Oh, he's worked at like so and so and so and so," and like
yeah, yeah,
have opinions of you, so kind of like preconceived and stuff like that. And ultimately you are coming in to manage these people but also mentor and help them get better
yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
So they probably want to know what you've done from like a technical point of view, like they want to know your successes. Are
Hmm.
probably way more eager to find out failures and things like that as well.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
how do you go in and kind of demonstrate that you're someone that they should be taking like career advice and technical
Mm.
advice and everything like that from?
Yeah, I think the key one, it almost kind of like stems back to the point I was making before, and things like asking the question. So that's kind of like various levels throughout the organization. So I think by asking questions, you're kind of getting information that you can then start to kind of process as a manager, as a leader, to then go, okay, well, how can I start making some change here? So whether that's like an organizational, a team change, like team structural things, processes, also down to the kind of individual level as well. So if people are coming to you and talking about, oh, I'm struggling with this like particular piece of technology, it might highlight that there's an issue there where people just need better training opportunities and that kind of thing. So I guess the kind of first and foremost is around kind of having my ear to the ground, like kind of understanding like what are the challenges people are facing, and then I can start to feed in. Okay, well, in a previous employer, we've done X, Y, Z. It seemed to work really well. Kind of suggesting things as well. So I think there's different ways to kind of demonstrate that worth or kind of deliver value in a team, and it's not just about kind of having one-to-ones and listening to people. It's about kind of being able to do different things. So um, obviously engineer and manager inherently is kind of like a technical role. You need to have some knowledge of like tech, but it's also around obviously like pastoral stuff as well. So if people are struggling and opening up about how they can be supported from like a I don't know personal circumstances and that kind of thing, you can obviously do whatever you can to support them there and signpost them. Learning opportunities again. So if you're picking up on things where people could do better learning, you can either speak with the L&D team, understand like what kind of options we've got there. But I think it's not all about I guess like the outputs in terms of those kind of things as well. Again, it comes down to like that listening and communication of things. So as a manager, even as like a new manager as well, like you kind of you're within that circle of kind of you understand like some bigger changes which might be going on within the business because you're kind of at that leadership level, so you're privy to more information. And I think the one of the key things that you can do as a manager, I guess, regardless of kind of tenure within a business, is kind of making sure you're feeding communication at the right level at the right time as well. So I think one of the traps which I definitely fell into when I started in like previous roles is being made aware of certain things which might be coming further down the line in terms of whether that's kind of delivery work hitting the team, whether it's kind of changes to the organizational structures and these kind of things. And I fell into that trap of just bombarding the team with everything that I kind of was made aware of. And I think one of the key skills there is knowing when to filter things out and almost know when to drip feed them into the team at the relevant times. I think that's where some of that demonstrating your worth or the value to the team can come in really beneficial because it's almost acting like a shield to the team to make sure that they're aware of things when they need to be, but then also kind of protecting them from like when they don't necessarily need to know about things because obviously people have got a lot going on in terms of like the day to day and it's finding that balance, I think.
For sure, particularly like you
Yeah,
said, things coming potentially down the pipeline, like
yeah, yeah.
there might things might never actually happen, and
Mm,
people can spend a week worrying about something that they didn't need to worry about at all, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
actually being able to be that kind of like filter out of what they need to know, like actually relaying messages in the right way, like you said, sort of filtering stuff out a little bit
mm,
can be extremely useful. At one point, going back to sort of like you were obviously asking all the questions when we were talking about
yeah.
that. Like, how much depth did you go into during like your interview process? Like, how much did you know? Like, as going through like an engineering manager in an interview, are you coming in
Yeah.
and you know a lot of this stuff, or like, well, from your experience joining not only here but like other organisations, are quite often things quite different when you actually get in?
I think there's always differences when you join a company. I don't think I've ever joined a company and everything's been as I guess as rosy as things have been sold. It's kind of like during the interview process. I think one thing I've definitely changed over like the last two or three kind of interview processes that I've been through is digging a bit deeper into I guess like the challenges and stuff that the business are facing because it's all good and well kind of saying oh, how good are your processes and like oh you're super cool because you use X tech and these kind of things. For me, it's important as an individual to know like what are the main problems that the business are facing. So that's generally one of the things I will really touch on. And even when like I'm internally within the company, so I've secured the role, started as a manager, I will kind of go through and start saying, okay, well, what are the I guess like the friction points within processes and stuff, and which is something that I'm kind of doing recently with my team is trying to understand the full end-to-end process of like ideas going from ideation discovery into kind of build and kind of post deployment and it's kind of understanding how I can improve things. But that kind of also applies in that interview process, as you say, because I think it's really important to, I guess, try and get as much information you can from prospective employers because you want to understand how you can, I guess, relate your existing skills or potential skills to go into a new role and kind of make some positive change. So, for example, in the recent rounds, when I was kind of interviewing with Co-op and a few other businesses, like some of the things I'll touch on there would be okay, well, tell me about your engineering culture, and they'd kind of expand on like certain things, but then I'd start digging a bit deeper into do you kind of have working groups to kind of improve on things and trying to kind of gain like what does that culture look like? Because if people are kind of saying, oh yeah, we just kind of teams just work in isolation and do things that kind of rings alarm bells. Whereas if businesses are starting to talk around, okay, well, we've got working groups trying to improve the, I don't know, like one thing I'm looking at now is around like external community engagements and stuff from like an engineering perspective. So it's things like that. Just try to really understand like what makes them tick internally, what kind of challenges are they facing, and what are they actually doing to try and address those challenges as well. That really highlights the kind of ethos behind like the whole like culture, both from like an engineering perspective, but like kind of the wider business and how that kind of fits into place.
Yeah, for sure. And then your structure, are you reporting into like a director or like a VP or something like that?
So co-op, the structure is kind of it's probably a little bit different to kind of most engineering orgs. So we are kind of looking at things and kind of changing the shape as we go and kind of just evolving over time, I guess. So I report into kind of like a lead engineering manager, which is probably kind of like a senior engineering manager, who generally sits at the kind of the practice lead level, so it's kind of looking over engineering as a whole and trying to understand how do we improve engineering practice. So some people will feed into kind of like a domain lead. So like I kind of work within what's called like cloud hosting, which is kind of everything within Microsoft Azure platform. Whereas some teams are more aligned in terms of kind of product domain, so they look at like a specific slice of things like membership or kind of electronic point of sale, like the till software and that kind of stuff. So some people kind of they have slight different kind of reporting hierarchies, but I kind of sit more within like the core engineering kind of space. So yeah, I report into the kind of the lead engineer, engineering manager rather, looking at the overall kind of engineering practice, but then
Nice.
also obviously look after the engineers from like that kind of perspective. But then part of my role is also about feeding into that engineering practice, as I mentioned there. So leaning on my existing skills, asking questions around, okay, why aren't we doing this? Why are we doing this? Looking at operational efficiencies, engineering excellence, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
So I was
kind of
going to
a
say, like
yeah,
demonstrating value is kind of got to go
yeah,
both ways, right? Like the
yeah, yeah,
obviously your team have got to see the value in you, but like
yeah,
going up within your organization to like the lead or like other organizations to kind of CTO, CEO, like whatever
yeah,
the size of the
yeah.
company, like you also like equally important, if not maybe slightly more important, to demonstrate your value of kind of why you've come in. So
Yeah,
getting
absolutely.
getting all of this structure and kind of figuring out where things are, you must be looking for holes or things that you can improve like quite
Mm,
quickly, even if they're small things, to just kind of have
yeah,
some sort of
yeah.
impact. Like, and it sounds like you're doing things like that already. Like, would you
Hmm.
would you say that you've kind of demonstrated value both ways, like within your first few months?
Um, I'd say so. Like, hopefully my peers say so as well. It's not just my own opinion. I think what I've tried to do is kind of look at it from both perspectives. So obviously there's the impact in terms of like the team that I'm working in. So there's obviously challenges that they've had in the past, and I'm there to kind of help look at like maybe changing process, supporting the individuals as I've kind of touched on in terms of like their own growth. So some of the stuff that I'm doing currently is going through like gap analysis in terms of capabilities and behaviors and that kind of thing, just to identify where individuals can benefit from additional support from me and kind of others within co-op. And then the other kind of aspect as well is kind of like more outward looking, as you say. So in terms of like outward looking from my team into the business, and looking at maybe like inefficiencies in process and things like that. And I think the key thing is it's kind of like knowing how much to kind of to bite off in that sense, because like when you join a business as big as Co-op, so to put it into perspective, like Co-op's huge, so there's around like 60 odd thousand employees. Not all of them are within engineering, like it's nowhere near that big. But there's a lot of consideration across like the process as a whole. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of different organizational challenges to kind of address, and um, I think with that it comes the the idea of like knowing when to kind of tackle something and when to almost like let something go and maybe address it a bit further down the line. So I think that's the kind of challenge I'm going through at the moment is trying to know which things I can actually make an impact on within like a reasonable time scale. So there's things which I can, I guess, sow the seed. Hopefully over 12 months, 24 months, things kind of might start to pan out. And there's definitely things where I can feed into them now, even within like the, I guess, like engineering managers practice. We can look at ways of improving how we can support our engineers and all these kind of things as well. So the things that are probably within my grasp a lot more. Um,
So
so yeah,
and being a part of a larger organization, have you got other
yeah,
managers that you've been able to kind of lean on and ask a lot of
yeah,
advice around and
yeah,
things like that?
yeah. So there's kind of a so there's like a group of engineering managers. I can't remember how many there are. I think it's around 12 or so other engineering managers as a co-op. And we kind of got like a community, so we get together every fortnight as kind of like an hour session where we can chat through things. There's a bit of a community on Slack where we can just kind of like ask any time and kind of feed into general conversations about challenges we're facing and those kind of things. So yeah, there's definitely kind of like a support network there of some people who've been at the business for like tons of years. Some people are more recent and have got like external perspectives, like similar to myself. And I think it's, if anything, it's like a nice healthy balance of different experiences in a pot where people can like really get on and kind of discuss things in like a bit of a safe space. And similar kind of outside of the EM space as well. So there's kind of like delivery managers, there's principal engineers you can lean on. Even got like really good rapport with like head of engineering and other people. So yeah, it's really good.
Nice. Obviously, you've worked at some smaller organisations as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
like, what's it been like having that sort of like amount of other engineering leaders, like
Mm,
as I guess support, but also you've got so many different opinions and ways of doing things, and like you said, levels of
yeah,
experience and stuff like
yeah,
that. How does that compare to being, for example, like the only engineering manager?
yeah. I think it definitely helps because I think you kind of got like a bit of a support net that you can kind of like lean on and kind of ask questions and validate ideas, which previously I've kind of done externally. So I've had like mentorship outside of work as well. So kind of completely impartial advice based on situations and stuff, which is like really beneficial and something I kind of advocate anyway. So if you've not got a mentor, then possibly seek one outside of work. But yeah, kind of comparing and contrasting. So like my previous role was a head of dev at a scale up, and that's probably like some like situation that you kind of mentioned in there in terms of I was like the sole kind of guy, kind of running the show in the engineering sense, and I think the thing there is kind of you're wearing a lot more hats than you would as just like a sole EM. So in a bigger organization where you've kind of got more people to kind of spread the challenges across, the kind of the things that you're trying to tackle are a lot thinner in a bigger organization. I know there's still big problems that you need to kind of focus on, but I think as that head of engineering in the previous company, there was a lot more to think about in terms of like the just general engineering practice, kind of the line management of the teams, and all the other kind of things that come with it. Kind of wearing a bigger kind of product owner hat as well, and kind of feeding into just general delivery and thinking about like the product a lot more than you probably would as an EM in a bigger company. Um, so yeah, I think the key differences there are like I guess it just depends on like where you fancy the challenge. So like I kind of quite happy with both. I think when I was in that previous role as like a head of dev in the scale up, the challenge there was more around kind of how do we make the most of our kind of reduced budget to kind of build things in a way which kind of obviously like serves the customer, but then obviously is more cost effective for the business, which is still relevant for a big company like Co-op. You still need to think about like cost efficiencies and those kind of things, but um, in a bigger org, they're usually like somebody else's kind of responsibility to think about more than yourself. Not That's kind of come across wrong. I think what I'm trying to say is like obviously you still need to think about those things, but not as you would as kind of like a sole person in that particular position. So
Yeah.
yeah, the kind of wider net is yeah, it's quite good.
For sure. But it sounds like at a smaller organization, you kind of sought out people that were in similar
Yeah,
roles at similar
yeah,
sized companies to try and
yeah,
get that similar sort of support network
yeah,
and similar
absolutely.
ideas.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. And then the last point you put down, which obviously must be hard whilst doing all these other things, is remaining organised and maintaining focus. So
yeah,
you've obviously got
yeah.
so much stuff going on and trying to make impact. Like you've got so much stuff that you need to find out. So how do you kind of
Mm.
like stay on top of everything and maintain focus during that period?
So I think there's kind of like key elements. I think I'll start off with kind of like the things I do from like a purely organizational thing. So I think it's kind of having the right tools in place. So irrespective of kind of how you find the things to focus on in the first place, I think so kind of like using the calendar wisely is like a key one for me. So especially as a new starter, I think it's like really important to kind of set the precedent of how you respond to certain things. So that kind of falls into the kind of category of being able to say no to things as well, and kind of having that balance to be able to do your job and then simply becoming somebody who says yes to absolutely every meeting and those kind of things. So it's knowing your worth and knowing when you can kind of join in and actually provide any value to things, which yeah, with some respect, it can take some time to understand when you can feed that value in, but over the course of time, you can start to say, you know what, I'm not really providing any value to this weekly meeting. I'm going to kind of avoid it for now. If you need me, just give me a shout and I'll kind of join in and add whatever comments I need to. From like another organizational perspective, um, one thing I find like really useful is firstly is kind of color coding my calendar. I know kind of it's like a very visual thing, and I find it really useful is looking at my week view. I can quite easily see that all my one-to-ones are in yellow. So I've got like a nice map view of, okay, well, this week I've got like 3 1-to-ones. I need to prepare for them. And just at a quick glance, all my team ceremonies are in a certain colour. Kind of leadership meetings are in another colour. And then any kind of like working groups and stuff are in another colour again. So I can quickly like see just at a quick glance, okay, well, looking at today, I've got like 2 1-to-ones followed by a working group. I've then got like a 2 hour gap and then I've got like another one-to-one in the afternoon and those kind of things. So for me, it just kind of helps me prepare for the day, understand what my goals are going to be, and like kind of go into the day with that kind of mentality of I know what I'm actually going to work on. And I find that really useful.
Do you
Um,
plan
uh,
almost like every minute of your day of like even in between your
um,
meetings, you know what you're going to be doing, or do you
to
leave some
a
time for sort of like
degree,
more reactive stuff?
I do kind of leave some time for like reactive things. So what I tend to do is if I've got a space in the day, I will block time out to kind of put it down as like focus time. So if something urgent does come up, then obviously kind of I will jump in and kind of support and do things what are necessary, which for the most part hasn't really been an issue since I've joined co-op, but in previous places, yeah. Um, but yeah, kind of blocking that time out in the calendar just means that if there's like a really meeting heavy morning or something, but then I've blocked like half the afternoon out, it means that nobody can kind of come in and steal that time in my calendar. They might ask me, and then if I feel okay, I'll be sure that's fine. But then for the most part, it just gives me a bit of time to kind of decompress and get away from like kind of meeting hell and a fried brain in the afternoon, which I think is yeah is really important to kind of make sure you've got that balance of going into meetings with the context and being able to go in like fresh with a fresh mind. Because I
And you
think
also
like
need time to
yeah
actually action anything that you're
yeah
getting from
absolutely
the meetings
yeah
as well, right?
yeah, which is kind of like another thing. So like with in terms of like my one-to-ones, I will do them like every other week. So my one-to-ones are usually grouped together in like an individual week spread between Monday and Friday. But that gives me an opportunity to have a kind of week in between where I've kind of got a lot more free time to focus on, I guess, my involvement in like the wider engineering stuff that I mentioned before, but also feeding into any queries or support and things that I need to get done for kind of my direct reports as well.
Yeah, because
Um,
I went through a habit of like I did mine weekly, but like I
yeah,
also didn't plan any time before them, any time after
yeah,
them. Whereas like
yeah,
changing them to bi-weekly and then
mm,
having bit of prep time before, bit of like
yeah,
time to like
yeah,
follow up afterwards, just like made so much difference. Because I feel like you talk
yeah,
about so much stuff, but then if you go straight into like another meeting like afterwards,
yeah,
then it's kind of gone. And then you
yeah,
leave it a couple of days, you're like, oh, I'll get around to it. And then you're almost back at like the next one to one. You're like,
yeah.
oh, I still haven't done that thing and all that kind of stuff. So
No, I
I
agree.
think give yourself a little bit of breathing room and actually planning the time to action stuff is so important.
Yeah, I think kind of it just reminds me of like one thing that I do as well is so I like to use Notion as kind of like a tool. I know people have got preferences for different things, OneNote or wherever it might be. But what when I kind of use Notion for one-to-one, so I kind of obviously go through and I've got that format I mentioned before, so kind of highlights, lowlights, and stuff. So as people are kind of going through the points, I will note them down. But equally, I've got kind of a list of things that I want to kind of get through myself. So it might be just updating them on some news from the company or kind of asking them some questions on things, giving feedback and that kind of stuff. But then in terms of actions, so with Notion, it's quite a powerful tool if you use it in like the right way. So I've kind of added in kind of action buttons, which I don't know if people kind of know or are aware of, but I kind of recommend you look into it. Is you can add an action button on the page, so you can click on the button and it'll like maybe pop up like a modal window, and you can fill in like a. Well, you can basically customize it to whatever you want. So in my case, when I'm in a one-to-one with Joe Blogs, I can click the button. It will then add whatever text I put into it's like a very simple Kanban board or like a to-do tracker, and it links it and tags it to that individual whose one-to-one it is.
Oh, nice.
So I literally just stick in the title of the thing that I want to do because that's enough to kind of jog my memory of the details generally.
Yeah.
So I literally click the button, type it in there quick, done. That's in the kind of backlog of things that I need to do. And then on a separate page in Notion, I've got kind of like a full board of here are all the tickets that I need to go through with the tags of who it's associated with. So if I need to follow up, I can ask questions. And so in that week off, my one-to-ones, I've kind of got that board I can work through and quite easily see the kind of things which are outstanding, and obviously move them across into the different typical kind of to-do done, or sort of to-do doing and done. So yeah, it's simple but powerful, I think.
That, nice. Well, no, I really appreciate that. And then I
Yeah, no
guess
problem.
any other like final points for that you found from your first kind of 3 months so far that
Um,
that you'd kind of recommend going into a new organization?
I think again it's probably situational, just depending on how your line manager is. But I think one of the key things for me is just being kind of be easy on yourself. I think it's quite easy to kind of go into a new organization, especially in the kind of like a management position, leadership position, and kind of think you've got to go in and be like effective from day one. Like sure, you want to be able to kind of go in and kind of do things and be good at your job, but I think unless you kind of give yourself that time to really embed yourself and kind of do the things that I mentioned before in terms of understand the challenges and such, you can't be as effective as you could be. So yeah, kind of the first 3 months, maybe even 6 months within a job, they're going to be probably the most challenging in terms of like understanding the domain and context. And without that, you're not really going to be as good as you can be. So I think yeah, just be easy on yourself and understand that obviously some things will come over time. And yeah, don't put too much pressure on yourself.
To like you said, you can't really go in week one have
No,
rapport with everyone, have everything figured
absolutely.
out, like
Yeah.
do all of that
Yeah,
stuff. And
it'd be
but I
nice, but
think
yeah. So,
yeah, but I think there's a bit of a timeline of like you've got
yeah.
this kind of diminishing timeline of where you can get all of your questions answered, and then
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
at the same time you can kind of figure out how you can respond to things, like how quickly
Mm.
you need to respond to things, which meetings you definitely need to be into. Because also at the same time, you can't just turn up day one and be like, I will not do meetings after 3 p.m. Like, because
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
might be something you
Yeah.
have to join in. Whereas I
Yeah.
know some people quite rigorously once they've been in organizations for a while, they're like, I will respond to things within 24 hours, or I don't do
Mm.
meetings on a Friday, or I don't even have my camera on these days, and like stuff like that because I'm doing
Yeah.
focus
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
you can't come in and obviously demand those things, but over that time you can be like, cool, so like you were saying, I don't need to be in that meeting, like let me
Mm.
know if I need to be, like this is how I'm going to respond to, how do other people respond to things, is there like a
Yeah. Yeah.
certain
Yeah.
way that the other managers are doing things, like what's fine, and then you can set out sort of your rules of engagement whilst kind of figure everything out as a business, and let people obviously know how to deal with you in a way as
Mm.
well, as
Absolutely.
well as
Yeah.
obviously like how the company does things.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Mike. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah. No problem.
If I know you're quite active on LinkedIn, like if anyone wants
Yeah.
to follow up with any questions or kind of connect with you or anything, is that the best place to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've kind of since I joined Co-op, I've been less active. Like mainly just because I needed a bit of time to kind of decompress and focus on the role. But yeah, they're planning to kind of start ramping things up. But yeah, if people any questions, feel free to connect them. I'm always open to have conversations.
Amazing. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah,
Speak to you soon.
no problem. Bye bye.